evening, fellow Force users and fellow Skrulls. What is up? It's Jasmine, the AhsokaTanoFan. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So guys, it is time for another episode of Secret Invasion. We are back with another review. This is the penultimate episode, so that would make next week the finale. It's more than likely I will go back to doing a reaction for the finale, but for today I thought I'd do another review of this episode. So without further ado guys, let's shapeshift our way into the video and review the episode. So this episode pretty much picks up right where the last episode left off, with a scene at the hospital in which the president looks like he's being transported to surgery. Fury's there and he basically warns the president that it wasn't the Russians that attacked him and not to trust Rhodey whatever he does. On a side note, I found the scene to be kind of funny when one of the healthcare workers told Fury that he had to wait outside, so he literally waits outside by pulling up the chair. That was funny. Fury's sarcastic sense of humor will always be the best. But Fury whispering that into his ear definitely plays a lot of significance, because if we jump forward in the episode a little bit, we know that Gravik tells Rhodey to tell the president that it was Russia who attacked him with the help of the Skrulls, and obviously Gravik's trying to do that to start an all-out war to get the president to bomb and essentially kill all the Skrulls of New Skrullos, and he thinks that that will be enough leverage over Fury to get what he wants from Fury, which we find out later on in the episode what that is that he actually wants. So we know that Rhodey, whose Skrull name is actually Raava, we find that out in this episode, does tell the president this, does give him this information that it was Russia and the Skrulls that attacked him, just as Gravik wanted him to. So given the fact that we saw Fury warn the president not to trust Rhodey and not to believe it was the Russians, one can only question, did he actually take Rhodey's words to heart and does he believe him, or is he going to trust Fury and not believe a word that Rhodey says? That's something we're going to have to find out going into the finale. Going back to the beginning of the episode, we now see a scene with Gravik in which he is assembling his soldiers, but they talk about the assault, or rather failed assault, which did not result in the demise of the president, but it left Talos dead instead. And we actually see for the first time Gravik being challenged a little bit here. Right away when I watched the scene, I noticed that I believe his name was, the black man, had a little bit of a disturbed look on his face, as if he didn't really like the leader that Gravik was becoming. And then you see Pagan challenge Gravik, and so in my mind I'm thinking, okay, the two of them and perhaps more of these soldiers, more of these Skrulls are gonna probably start to turn against Gravik, but I was not expecting Gravik to just kill him like that, in which he did, to set an example to everybody else in the room. And you could tell by the look on Beto's face, he was not happy about that, and that at one point he is probably going to turn against him. We actually do find out what happens regarding this in a later scene. I'm gonna jump forward in the episode a bit here. When Gravik is on the phone, one of his men sneaks up on him with a weapon and attacks him, and a bunch of them start attacking him. And for a moment, it's not looking too good for Gravik. But then, lo and behold, we kind of momentarily forgot, shoot, he's a super Skrull, so he was able to end up taking them all on, no problem. And he ends up publicly killing Beto. This was a really powerful scene because, for one, you actually get to see Gravik's real face. I don't believe that we have seen that this far in the series, or if we did, it wasn't for very long. You're getting to see the true Gravik in a sense. And while we're visually seeing that, Beto's last words were, "You're nothing but a monster." So it's kind of ironic that we're seeing Gravik visually for who he is in his true Skrull form. At the same time, one of his men is calling him nothing but a monster. So we're meant to, I guess, interpret that as Gravik is becoming a monster. It's easy to kind of get lost in what his whole mission was in the first place, which was he's trying to help his people find a home. He's trying to be there and fight for his people, and yet he has no problem slaughtering them, and now he's basically gambling with all of their lives by allowing his base and that intel to be given to the enemy, the opposite side. He doesn't care how many Skrulls he has to kill for the perceived greater good. It definitely makes his struggle and goal seem a little bit contradictory. And it goes back to what Gaia said in the previous episode, which was, are you the leader of Skrulls or are you our worst enemy? Something along those lines. And right now, by the looks of that scene and how things have been going with him, you could definitely say that he's probably the Skrull's worst enemy in a way. That scene also left me thinking the one person that I could see taking Gravik down would probably be Gaia. Not only is she a Skrull as well, and maybe more likely to establish a good rapport with other Skrulls, in the sense that she might be able to lead people away from Gravik and allow them to follow her instead. But also, he doesn't even know that she's still alive, so she is the one person that could have the advantage of an element of surprise. On top of of that, Gravik is responsible for the death of her mother first and now her father. So I'm still sticking to what I said before, which was I am anticipating a showdown between Gaia and Gravik. They're also both super soldiers, so there's that as well. Everything in the story to me points towards the two of them having a showdown and the future Skrulls and the Skrulls of New Skrullos falling behind Gaia instead. So back to Rhodey and Gravik for a second. So as I mentioned before, we learned Rhodey's real Skrull name in this episode, which is Raava. We know that Gravik is instructing him to keep the president alive this time and to convince him that Russia and the Skrulls are working together. We still don't know if the president believes Rhodey or not because Fury did warn him not to. He's doing all this because Fury has something that he wants, which we learn later in the episode is called the Harvest. We're gonna get to that in a second. When we see Rhodey and Fury at the hospital, Fury confronts him head on and essentially threatens him, pulls a gun on him, and calls him a Skrull right to his face. This scene kind of surprised me because his men seem to have no reaction, the Secret Service, which leads me to wonder, do they just not believe what Fury's saying? They believe Rhodey is an actual human, or are they themselves Skrulls? Because I can't understand why they wouldn't have had more of a reaction in that sense, especially since Talos was shown on TV in his alien form, in his Skrull form. So they've got to be thinking that there are Skrulls amongst us, right? So that part I was kind of wondering about. But essentially Fury threatens Rhodey, but Rhodey quickly turns that back around on Fury and lets him know that he is about to release the footage of him, which is not really him, of his Gravik, killing Maria Hill to the media. And we find out in the next scene that's exactly what he did. Son of a... He basically followed through with what he said he was gonna do, and now he's essentially made Fury the world's most wanted man. So now not only is Fury fighting against Gravik and the Skrulls, he now has to deal with the regular people who are gonna see him as a killer and responsible for Maria Hill's death. We then move over to Sonya, and she approaches this guy who looks an awful lot like the man she was looking at in her file when she said she had an infiltration problem of her own. This crazy lady just shoots him in the leg, and it is revealed that he is a Skrull, which is again just a reminder how in the show you never really know who is a Skrull and who isn't. One of Sonya's words later in the episode is something along the lines of who isn't a Skrull these days. She then asks this guy about Rosa Dalton. Dalton is a name that we've heard before. We know that there is a Dr. Dalton or Dr. Daltons, because it's a married couple, that is working on some sort of super Skrull machine, and they are involved in some sort of research that is basically helping Gravik and his cause. And we know that Sonya has been after this information from day one, back when she interrogated Brogan about what Gravik's plans were involving this machine. So we can now see that she is literally getting closer and closer to figuring this out. It's also revealed in the episode that the Daltons are both Skrulls, and not only does she collect their research, she ends up executing the husband and convincing the wife to help her and to side with her and turn on Gravik essentially. She then torches the lab. So Sonya is one of those interesting characters where you can't really tell if she's good or bad. She just kind of has a goal and a mission, and nothing basically is going to stop her, get in her way of completing that mission, no matter the cost. That's kind of the character that she is. We do see that she is allies, at least for now, with Fury, and they do seem to have the same goal in mind when it comes to fighting against the secret invasion. But Sonya's methods definitely seem to be more brutal compared to Fury's. But it is interesting how Sonya has been very sharp so far at determining who is a Skrull and who isn't. She did that with Brogan, she did that with the gentleman that she confronted in this episode in the office. She did that with the Daltons, and yet she wasn't aware that Rhodey was a Skrull. So just as she has kind of been tough on Fury in the past of not always being on point, aware of what's happening, it seems as though she herself sometimes is not always on top of her game and aware of what's happening necessarily. We do see more of Sonya and Fury towards the end of the episode, but before we get into that, moving on in the episode, we see a scene take place between Fury and Gaia. They meet at this building. One of the things Fury says is the path of struggle is steep. He essentially says that that is the path that Talos has taken. You see Gaia obviously hurt by the loss of her father, and not only the fact that he has died, but that he died on a foreign planet, and she feels as though he died for nothing. And that's when Fury steps in and says he didn't die for nothing. He chose the path of struggle. So you kind of wonder from the scene, will Gaia continue to think as she's done and want to do things differently from her father, or will she kind of pick up where he left off and finish what he started so that his death doesn't become in vain? I think she does make kind of good points about him seemingly having died for nothing. Is this Skrull struggle in vain? Are they even going to be successful in what they're trying to do? If they are, at what cost? It seems like it's costing a lot of lives. She's lost her father. Even Gravik, he almost is seeming to get lost in the cause. He's killing so many of his own people that can he even say that he is being a good leader to Skrulls and has their best interests at heart, right? Or as what Fury was talking about, is this just what the path of struggle looks like? Are they all taking the path of struggle in a sense? So during this scene, Gaia mentions that Gravik was after something called the harvest. This is obviously a highlight of the episode and a very important point, no doubt, especially since the episode itself is called Harvest. This is where we start to learn a little bit more about what it is Gravik actually wants from Fury. We learn about the harvest and how it seems to be some sort of DNA that's being collected by Gravik, but as per Gaia, he's only been able to collect a few samples so far. She lists a couple species, so we're starting to get a sense of what this harvest might be, but we don't fully find out more about it until the end of the episode, which we will get to when we discuss that final scene. In this episode, you see that Gaia and Priscilla end up meeting. You first see Gaia is grieving the loss of her father. She has her father's body, and she goes to Priscilla for help in burying him. We see the two of them bury Talos, and actually when Gaia was speaking the Skrull language during the scene, it definitely kind of reminded me of Daenerys speaking Dothraki from Game of Thrones. You kind of get the sense that Priscilla is sort of like a mother figure to her, which is really important considering the fact that she lost both of her parents. They do engage in some discussion about life, and the discussion goes well for the most part until Gaia essentially asks Priscilla if Nick Fury's ever seen her in her actual Skrull form, in which she gets offended by that question. I guess you kind of wonder, by the offense, are we to assume that he prefers her in her human form and that maybe bothers her? We know that he's seen her in her Skrull form based off of a flashback scene a couple episodes back where she brought him Gravik as a young boy. But you could tell that that question kind of hit her on a deeper level. Maybe there's something deeper there that actually bothers her. Maybe she wishes that Fury would like to see her in her Skrull form more often. Or maybe she's so used to being Priscilla Davis that she kind of has lost touch with her actual identity. Either way, I found that conversation interesting, but we didn't really have much time to process it because then all of a sudden attackers strike, the same attackers that Gravik talked about sending to hunt down Priscilla Davis earlier in the episode, which of course was because she did not do what she's supposed to, and that was to kill Fury. We see some action ensue. Luckily, they are able to overcome the attackers. We see them a bit later part ways, in which she tells Gaia to be careful. So you kind of wonder exactly what she's referring to when she says to be careful. Was there something Gaia said she was going to do? Is she perhaps going after Gravik to kill him? Either way, I guess we'll find out next week what exactly she told Gaia to be careful about. On a side note, we see that Fury's on his way to Finland, and we see that he is on a plane in which this guy pops out and he hands Fury what looks to be some sort of device and a passport. We don't really know what this is right away, but of course we find out what it is later. It ends up being the Widow's Veil and passports for Finland. During this scene, I was looking at it and I thought, that guy looks familiar. I could swear that that's the same guy from Black Widow. And lo and behold, it is none other than Rick Mason, who we did see in Black Widow. I thought that was kind of a cool cameo. We see an airport scene shortly after going into Finland, and you see this man. Immediately you're kind of thinking, is this possibly Fury? But how is it Fury? Some type of Skrull? Because obviously in a show where we're constantly being shown Skrulls, that's kind of your first thought. But no, it ends up being that it is Fury using the Widow's Veil. Now the Widow's Veil is something that we've seen before in Captain America, and it was worn by Black Widow or Natasha Romanoff. And so we get to see that technology being used again to help smuggle Fury into Finland, where he meets Sonya Falsworth. And by the way, Sonya listening to rap music in that scene was so funny and so cute. I didn't know how much I needed to actually see that.
This is what we're doing?
Yes, this is absolutely what we're doing.
So during this whole final scene now, which we've kind of hinted at earlier on in the video, there's quite a few reveals. Number one, Sonya finds out that Rhodey is a Skrull. Number two, we find out more about the harvest. Number three, Sonya finds out that Fury's wife is a Skrull. You could tell in the look in her eyes when she finally finds that out that everything kind of makes sense to her, why this particular war or fight, if you will, is difficult for Fury. We find out finally that the harvest is essentially a collection of DNA that was spilt during the Avengers battle in Endgame. So essentially this DNA could consist of superheroes, potentially super villains. We find out that Fury is the one who assembled the secret team of Skrulls to collect this DNA. As much as Fury's heart's usually in the right place, he does kind of have a little bit of a shady background, and he always seems to have a secret plan of his own that doesn't necessarily involve other people. And in this sense, unfortunately, it's kind of blowing up in his face, and he even admits that this whole mess is essentially his fault, and that's why he came back. He reveals that he has a tombstone, not just in Finland, but actually in several locations in the world. And in this particular tombstone, the vial, which contains the harvest, is hidden. You kind of really wonder what's gonna happen now, because Gravik obviously wants this to create his own team of super Skrulls, which will definitely make Skrulls unstoppable. Definitely not looking good. This is definitely a mess that Fury has to step in and fix now. Is he actually going to give Gravik this vial, or does he, in Fury fashion, have another plan up his sleeve? We see that he collects a bunch of weapons and gadgets. He puts on his eye patch, so he's really looking like the Fury that we all know. And he speaks to somebody on the phone and says something like, "It's time, let's finish this." You kind of wonder who exactly is he speaking to, but either way, it looks like he is not ready to go down without a fight, and he does have some sort of plan. Sonya even asked him if he was prepared to call on the Avengers again, in which he basically, in a roundabout way, said he didn't want to always rely on them. It's ironic because just as he secretly assembled the Avengers, he also secretly assembled the Skrull team. And so now 2 of his secret inventions, although not so secret anymore, are kind of at risk of clashing with one another. I think perhaps why he didn't want to call in the Avengers is because he looks at this as his problem and his mess to fix. I guess we just gotta wait and see what happens next week, guys. But either way, from the end of the episode, it definitely looks like Fury is back and he is ready for a fight. So we gotta just find out what exactly it is he has planned now. But anyways, guys, this was a decent episode. Definitely setting up for next week's finale. But as always, guys, do let me know what you thought down below in the comments of the episode and what your predictions are for the finale. And as always, guys, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And I will see you next week for the finale, episode 6 of Secret Invasion. Until next time, guys, take care and see you soon.